if you look at various polls, Asian Americans are most likely to believe in the idea of self-made success. They're most likely to believe that if you work hard, you can achieve what you want in your life, compared to
right, a white
Americans
supremacist, racist trope that's now what would you
under
say?
attack.
Well,
Under attack.
it's a form of microaggression that's frowned upon, whose utterance is frowned upon in many universities. Formally, you
Right.
can't say that hard work puts you ahead. It's like it's a microaggression, and you can see why. Look, here's the reason. It's like, well, there are lots of people who are poor and dispossessed, despite the fact that they've worked hard. Right? They're ill, let's say, or they're impaired in their intelligence, or they haven't managed an education, or there's all sorts of reasons that hard work isn't going to work. But that doesn't
even
mean
bad luck, even bad luck,
of course,
various tragedies that happen in your life.
Yeah, you get hit by a bus because you're standing in the wrong place. That's why you need enough sophistication to look at a multifactorial explanation.
Right. And even, you can control for economic status and still find some of these racial disparities. So low income Asian Americans have higher upward mobility compared to low income Black Americans and white Americans and Hispanic Americans. So,
and it's probably native born Black Americans, because Nigerians seem to do pretty well. And generally speaking, Black immigrants to the United States outperform, just as let's say people from the Indian subcontinent outperform native-born Caucasians in the U.S. The immigrant Black population outperforms the native-born Black population in the U.S. by a substantial margin.
Yeah, even if you look in the same city. So Thomas Sowell has done some great research on this. In the city of Boston, you have the native-born Black Americans and you have the immigrant Black American group. And the immigrant Black American group, their performance is much higher. Their education rates, their high school completion, their earnings, they're much higher. But so in that same city, right, whatever force of systemic racism that exists, it's constant, right? Because you can't distinguish between somebody from Nigeria versus somebody who's Black, who's
well, you might
Chicago.
think that it's actually worse for the immigrants because they have an accent, and there are other features that mark them out as strange, different.
Right, they're unacculturated to the various norms in society. Lower rates of English speaking proficiency, all those things matter. But there seems to be this kind of disinclination towards behavioral explanations for success. There only seems to be sort of external prejudice-based explanations. So
well, part of it is that people are loath to blame the dispossessed. Yeah, and fair enough. But fair enough. It's reasonable to check yourself against doing that, because you can pass the homeless person on the street and say, if you weren't so goddamn useless, you'd get a job. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe not. And there, but for the grace of God go I, which is something always useful to keep in mind. But the problem with not assuming that individual planning and diligent effort and moral evaluation and ambition matter is that you take away the very tools, you deny the validity of the very tools that could be most effectively used by most individuals who are dispossessed. And that's a terrible thing to do. I mean, the reason I emphasize individual responsibility, there's two reasons. One is, well, you can start right now, right where you are, no matter what you're doing. So you have that at hand. Second, if you become more responsible, you probably won't hurt anyone by doing it, right? It removes the convenience of the enemy. And that's given how terrible it is for us to generate, say, class-based explanations of enmity or racial-based explanations of enmity. That's something we really have to step carefully around. I mean, the worst crimes the human race has ever committed have been generated by class-based hypotheses of malevolence, class or ethnicity-based hypotheses of malevolence. It's terrible. And we need to avoid that. And I don't see that adopting more individual responsibility, even though it's not a cure-all, it doesn't, that's one danger it doesn't pose, in my estimation.